Hello, my ladies of inestimable value. The moment a Sigma female stops caring, the universe feels it before you do. That's not poetry. That's pattern. Because here's an uncomfortable fact most people don't realize. Psychologists say humans leak emotion even when they try to hide it. But Sigma females are one of the very few personality types who can shut their emotional broadcast off completely. When she's done, there's literally nothing for anyone to read. No signals, no clues, no softness. Nothing. And that's exactly why people panic. A Sigma female doesn't need to slam doors, raise her voice, or post dramatic quotes online. She simply flips an internal switch, and the whole dynamic goes silent. Like the Wi-Fi went out in the middle of your favorite show. Everyone suddenly realizes how much they depended on her presence, her clarity, her emotional intelligence, and how badly they underestimated her exit. What makes it even more intriguing is this. Sigma females don't stop caring because they're petty or vengeful. They stop caring because they've already analyzed the situation from every angle, found the pattern, traced the energy leak, and decided the connection no longer deserves her bandwidth. And when that moment arrives, her behavior changes in ways so subtle, so precise, so psychologically surgical that people only notice after the damage is done. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, it's not messy, it's clean, controlled, final, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who thought they still mattered. Today we're diving into the 12 unmistakable, extraordinary ways Sigma females show they couldn't care less. Signs so unique, so brutally honest, and so unmistakably Sigma that once you recognize them, you'll never miss them again. Let's get into it. Number 1, she stops defending you when others criticize you. When a Sigma female stops caring, one of the most shocking things you'll notice is how effortlessly she lets go of protecting your reputation. She doesn't suddenly become cruel or vindictive. She simply withdraws the shield she once instinctively held up for you. If someone speaks badly about you, she doesn't jump in to explain, defend, or justify your actions. She doesn't offer excuses or smooth over the situation. The buffer she once provided, the invisible cushion that softened criticism, disappears entirely. This isn't laziness or apathy, it's deliberate clarity. A Sigma female understands the world exactly as it is. She knows people will think what they think, say what they say, and judge however they judge. When she stops caring, she no longer invests her energy in managing others' perceptions of you. You are no longer her responsibility, and she has no incentive to carry the weight of your image for you. Her silence is sharper than words because it conveys a single, undeniable truth. She has withdrawn her emotional investment, and you're fully on your own. What's fascinating is that this change isn't abrupt in a dramatic sense. It's quiet, almost imperceptible at first. A shrug here, a lack of commentary there, until eventually it becomes impossible to ignore. She no longer absorbs the blow of social judgment for you. She doesn't mitigate gossip or soften criticism. She stops cushioning your world, and in its place there is only the clarity of her detachment. It's brutal in its simplicity. For those who relied on her protection, it can feel like a sudden void. But for the Sigma female, it's freedom. Freedom from unnecessary emotional labor, freedom from the burden of caring for someone who no longer commands her attention. It's not cruelty, it's efficiency. She reallocates her energy to herself, to priorities she deems worthy, and to the things that actually matter in her life. Once she reaches this stage, it's a clear signal that the connection has run its course. She has moved on, fully and decisively. You are left facing the consequences of your own actions and reputation because she has chosen not to carry that load anymore. This is one of the most unmistakable, powerful ways a Sigma female signals she couldn't care less, and it leaves an impact that is quietly unforgettable. Number 2. She stops giving second interpretations. A Sigma female's mind is a machine built to understand, analyze, and decode people. Normally, she looks beyond the surface, reads between the lines, and gives people the benefit of the doubt. She searches for hidden intentions, alternative explanations, and deeper meanings behind words or actions. That skill makes her extraordinary. It allows her to navigate the world with clarity and subtlety. But when she stops caring, that entire mechanism shuts down. She no longer scans for reasons to justify your behavior. The excuses she once offered silently, the internal debates she ran to soften your flaws in her mind, all of it disappears. What she sees is what she accepts. There's no reinterpretation, no mental gymnastics, no rewinding the tape to make your actions fit her expectations. She simply observes, categorizes, and moves on without any attempt to reconcile the gap between her standards and your reality. This detachment is striking because it removes the safety net people usually rely on when interacting with her. Before, you might have thought there was room for negotiation, room for misunderstanding, room to explain yourself and win her back emotionally. After she stops giving second interpretations, that illusion is gone. She doesn't overthink your intentions, but she also doesn't protect you from the consequences of your actions in her perception. The neutrality is almost surgical. She sees clearly and acts as though the space between perception and reality is fixed. The shift can feel sudden, even ruthless, because she doesn't announce it. It's quiet, almost invisible at first, but unmistakable once you notice it. A Sigma female who stops giving second interpretations no longer invests energy in reconciling your contradictions. She doesn't try to read you or fill in the gaps in your character. She simply registers the facts as they are and lets them exist without her involvement. It's a sign of absolute detachment, a boundary drawn so cleanly that there's no chance of crossing it without her consent. Once this switch flips, it's a declaration. She no longer cares enough to navigate the gray areas for anyone else. Her attention, her analysis, and her empathy are now reserved for herself or those who meet her standards consistently. And that, above everything, signals a Sigma female who is truly checked out emotionally, mentally, and energetically. Number 3. She becomes immune to emotional time wasting. When a Sigma female stops caring, one of the most profound changes you'll notice is how she disengages from anything that doesn't serve her mentally or emotionally. Emotional time wasting, endless complaints, dramatics, manipulative games, or needless explanations used to capture her attention, at least to some degree. She might have listened, offered insight, or subtly redirected energy to maintain harmony. But once she no longer cares, that entire bandwidth disappears. She no longer participates in the cycles of unnecessary emotional labor that others depend on her to manage. This shift is not born from apathy. It is born from precision. She understands exactly where her energy is going and refuses to expend it on anything unworthy. Drama that once seemed urgent now registers as background noise. Long explanations, drawn-out conflicts, or repeated emotional outbursts are ignored or met with neutral detachment. She recognizes them for what they are, distractions that do not deserve her presence. There is no irritation in her response, no bitterness. It is a matter-of-fact disengagement that leaves no room for negotiation or persuasion. The change is subtle, yet striking. She doesn't argue. She doesn't scold. She simply does not enter into the energy vortex created by emotional time-wasting. You might notice her being physically present, but mentally she is elsewhere, untouchable and calm, as though the entire drama exists on a different plane. People around her start to realize that their usual tactics, complaining, persuading, or seeking validation, no longer work. They might try harder, but she remains unaffected, consistent in her detachment. Her immunity to emotional time-wasting is a reflection of her priorities. It signals that her focus is on what truly matters to her: goals, personal growth, meaningful connections, and that she will not allow trivial distractions to consume her life. This level of detachment is both fascinating and intimidating because it highlights how effortlessly a Sigma female can reclaim her energy once she decides something or someone is no longer worth it. She doesn't react. She conserves, she redirects, and in doing so, she makes it unmistakably clear that her time, her mind, and her energy belong solely to herself. Number 4. She disconnects emotionally but stays polite socially. When a Sigma female stops caring, one of the most fascinating and disarming behaviors she exhibits is the complete emotional shutdown paired with social politeness. She doesn't explode, she doesn't lash out, and she doesn't make grand gestures to signal her detachment. Instead, she maintains a calm, composed exterior, interacting with the world as if everything is normal, while internally she has pulled every ounce of emotional investment away. The gap between her outward behavior and inner detachment is where the power lies. She shows up, she smiles when necessary, she nods and engages in conversation, but the emotional thread that once connected her to people is gone. There is no underlying tension, no visible frustration, just an effortless neutrality that leaves others confused. People may interpret her politeness as interest or engagement, but it's a careful illusion. She's entirely present in form, but her mind, her priorities, and her energy are elsewhere. She has mastered the art of existing socially without giving a single ounce of emotional labor. This behavior is striking because it is both subtle and intense. Unlike those who withdraw entirely or act out of anger, a Sigma female doesn't make her detachment obvious. She doesn't need to punish or prove a point. Her indifference is invisible, yet undeniable. Those around her may not immediately notice, but over time, the absence of her genuine emotional investment becomes glaring. Conversations feel flat, interactions lack warmth, and the energy she once brought to relationships vanishes. What makes this even more powerful is the strategic nature of it. By staying socially polite, she avoids unnecessary conflict and drama, keeping her detachment clean and unassailable. She doesn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her upset or hurt. She simply withdraws internally while maintaining external harmony. This duality is mesmerizing, even unsettling. It's a clear signal. She couldn't care less, but she doesn't need to show it through anger or confrontation. She has simply decided that her emotional energy is no longer up for grabs, and she will interact with the world only on her terms, calm, composed, and completely untouchable. Number 5. She no longer hides the fact that she's already moved on, mentally or emotionally. When a Sigma female stops caring, the most undeniable signal is how effortlessly she shows that she has moved on, both mentally and emotionally. Unlike most people, she doesn't cling to pretenses, subtle hints, or lingering attachments. The moment her mind decides that a person, situation, or connection no longer deserves her energy, she disengages completely, and she doesn't try to mask it. There's no secret retreat, no private grieving, no hidden hope. Her detachment is visible to anyone paying attention, yet it's delivered with such quiet precision that it doesn't feel aggressive or confrontational. She doesn't need to broadcast it, and she doesn't make it a statement. It simply exists in her behavior, in the small shifts that accumulate into undeniable clarity. Her thoughts are elsewhere, her priorities are realigned, and her conversations reflect the absence of emotional attachment. You might notice she doesn't over-explain herself anymore, doesn't linger on past grievances, and no longer invests time in attempting to reconcile the unimportant. Every action, every glance, every pause carries the subtle weight of someone who has fully moved forward. What makes this so unsettling for others is the combination of calm composure and absolute detachment. She doesn't sulk, she doesn't dramatize her exit, and she doesn't make anyone feel guilty for her disengagement. She simply occupies space differently, less accessible, less predictable, and less emotionally available. That absence of investment speaks louder than words ever could. It communicates a message. The chapter is closed, the energy is reclaimed, and any expectations of rekindling interest or concern are irrelevant. Her ability to move on so decisively is rooted in self-respect and mental clarity. She values her own time, her emotional bandwidth, and her inner peace far too much to dwell where it isn't deserved. This level of detachment isn't about cruelty or indifference in the shallow sense. It's strategic, deliberate, and absolute. Once a Sigma female has moved on, she doesn't look back. She has already reclaimed her focus, her energy, and her life, leaving anyone who once mattered behind in a state of quiet astonishment at just how fully she can let go. Number 6. She stops offering strategic empathy. A Sigma female is usually a master of understanding people, often knowing more about someone's motivations and emotions than they realize themselves. Her empathy is not accidental, it's strategic, measured, and precise. She gives it selectively to maintain balance, influence outcomes subtly, or protect those she genuinely cares about. But when she stops caring, that carefully deployed empathy evaporates. She no longer invests mental energy in deciphering your emotional state or cushioning your feelings. She simply registers reality as it is, without consideration for the impact on you. This absence is striking because her empathy is normally invisible, yet powerful. People rely on it without realizing it, taking for granted that she will always adjust, soften, or navigate their emotional turbulence. When she decides she doesn't care, the safety net disappears entirely. Her patience doesn't stretch to decode excuses, explain irrational behavior, or soften harsh truths. She interacts on a baseline level of fact and observation, stripped of the emotional intelligence she once generously applied. There is no malice in this withdrawal. It is a clean, calculated disengagement. The effect is almost surgical. Conversations that once flowed with subtle understanding become mechanical. People notice the change immediately, even if they can't articulate why. She no longer anticipates needs, preempts reactions, or absorbs emotional shocks to protect others. The dynamic shifts entirely. Her absence of strategic empathy forces others to face their own behavior and its consequences without her buffering influence. It is quiet, precise, and disarming. This behavior is not about cruelty, it is about preservation. She understands her energy is finite, and when a person or situation no longer warrants her investment, she stops giving what she once freely offered. Her withdrawal of strategic empathy signals a total re-evaluation of priorities, a redirection of emotional bandwidth toward herself, and a refusal to be manipulated or drained by others. Once this shift occurs, it's unmistakable. She no longer carries the invisible load of others' emotions, and the space she leaves behind makes it painfully clear just how powerful, controlled, and untouchable a Sigma female can be when she chooses to disengage. Number 7. She begins prioritizing her comfort over your expectations. When a Sigma female stops caring, one of the most noticeable and unsettling changes is how she unapologetically prioritizes her own comfort over the expectations of others. Normally, she is aware of social cues, obligations, and the subtle needs of those around her, often adjusting her behavior to maintain harmony or avoid unnecessary friction. But once her care fades, She no longer bends, accommodates, or tempers her actions to suit anyone else. Her comfort, peace of mind, and personal boundaries suddenly become the primary factors guiding every decision she makes. This doesn't mean she becomes selfish in a shallow sense. She doesn't flaunt her detachment to provoke or punish. Instead, she simply reallocates her energy toward what serves her best. If she's tired, she rests. If she's bored, she disengages. If a situation feels unnecessary, inconvenient, or emotionally draining, she removes herself without hesitation. Invitations, expectations, obligations, everything is weighed against her own mental and emotional equilibrium, and anything that tips her balance is quietly discarded. What makes this behavior so striking is how quietly revolutionary it is. People around her may not notice immediately because she doesn't announce her shift. There's no argument, no dramatic exit, no confrontation. She continues moving through life with the same composed presence, yet every choice subtly signals that her energy is no longer available for anyone else's convenience. Her boundaries, once flexible, become firm walls. By prioritizing her comfort, she creates a psychological clarity that is both rare and intimidating. She no longer sacrifices herself to meet the arbitrary demands of others. She refuses to overextend, over-explain, or overcommit. The people who once depended on her compliance suddenly find that she operates entirely on her own terms, and the realization is stark. This is the power of a Sigma female who doesn't care anymore. Her energy, attention, and decisions are hers alone, and she will not compromise them for anyone who cannot meet her on equal footing. Her comfort becomes her compass, and everything else adjusts or falls away accordingly. Number 8, she treats the connection like a burnt fuse, something that won't turn back on. When a Sigma female stops caring, the connection she once nurtured doesn't just fade. It is treated like a fuse that has completely burned out. There is no flicker, no residual spark, no hope of reignition. The emotional current that once flowed between her and the other person is cut off decisively, and she approaches the relationship with a clarity that is both unsettling and absolute. This is not about anger or punishment. It's about recognition. She has analyzed, assessed, and concluded that the connection no longer deserves her energy, and she moves forward without looking back. Her detachment is precise. She doesn't linger on the past or revisit memories selectively. She simply acknowledges them as closed chapters. The space that the connection once occupied is no longer active in her mind, and interactions, if they exist at all, are stripped of warmth, investment, or anticipation. She does not engage in attempts to maintain superficial civility or keep the bond alive out of habit. In her mental and emotional framework, the fuse has burned completely, leaving no pathway for a revival. What makes this behavior so powerful is its quiet, almost invisible nature. She doesn't broadcast that the connection is dead. She demonstrates it through consistency. Her absence of effort, her lack of emotional responsiveness, and her neutral presence all communicate the same message. Whatever existed before is over. People accustomed to her involvement may not initially recognize it, but over time, the reality of her detachment becomes impossible to ignore. This approach is both efficient and final. It spares her from unnecessary drama, manipulation, or energy depletion. By treating the connection as irreparable, she ensures that her emotional bandwidth is fully reclaimed for herself and for situations she deems worthy. There is no turning back, because she understands the cost of reigniting a connection that no longer serves her well-being. The burnt fuse is a silent declaration. The relationship is done, and her detachment is complete, leaving a stark impression on anyone who once thought they held influence over her attention or care. Number 9, she stops defending you when others criticize you. When a Sigma female stops caring, one of the most striking and unmistakable changes is how she stops defending you when others criticize or judge you. This shift isn't loud or confrontational. It's subtle, clean, and devastating in its quiet power. Before, she might have instinctively shielded you, softened harsh words, or explained your actions to protect your reputation. Her presence alone often acted as a buffer, diffusing tension and preventing criticism from landing fully. But once she disengages, that protective layer disappears entirely, and she no longer feels responsible for managing how others perceive you. This behavior is a direct reflection of her boundaries and self-respect. She understands that carrying the weight of other people's expectations or reputations is a form of emotional labor, and she refuses to expend that labor on someone she no longer prioritizes. The moment she decides not to care, she lets others face you as you are, without her intervening. Her silence in these moments is sharper than any argument because it communicates without words that your actions and consequences are no longer her concern. The impact of this withdrawal is profound. People who once relied on her subtle interventions or explanations may suddenly realize just how much influence she had over social dynamics. Her detachment forces reality to land on its own terms, without her cushioning or managing it. There's no malice in her behavior, only a clear, unflinching redirection of energy toward what truly matters to her. She no longer sacrifices her focus, peace of mind, or attention for anyone else's comfort. This is a powerful and unmistakable sign that a Sigma female has emotionally checked out. She has drawn the line, reclaimed her energy, and refused to carry the weight of someone else's image or reputation. The absence of her defense leaves a lasting impression because it reveals the quiet strength and absolute control she maintains over her own mind and priorities. Once this boundary is set, it is firm, final, and impossible to ignore. Number 10. She stops reading the room on purpose. A Sigma female is usually hyper-aware of her environment, constantly scanning social cues, energy shifts, and unspoken dynamics. She reads the room effortlessly, adjusting her words, tone, and presence to match or influence the energy around her. It's a skill that makes her interactions smooth, her influence subtle, and her presence magnetic. But when she stops caring, that skill disappears, or more accurately, she chooses not to use it. She no longer bends, softens, or strategizes to fit the expectations or comfort of others. She disengages from the invisible social choreography she once mastered. This deliberate choice is striking because it breaks the rhythm that everyone has come to expect. People accustomed to her reading, understanding, and subtly guiding social situations are suddenly faced with someone who moves through the space purely on her own terms. She doesn't mirror emotions, she doesn't smooth over tensions, and she doesn't moderate her presence to avoid conflict or discomfort. Her neutrality can feel disarming, even destabilizing, because it exposes a social dynamic that was previously invisible. She is no longer performing for anyone's comfort. The effect of this shift is both quiet and profound. Conversations and group interactions change in her presence. People who relied on her empathy or subtle guidance notice gaps, awkward pauses, or blunt responses where there once was careful adjustment. Her indifference isn't chaotic, it's precise. She doesn't engage in unnecessary drama, she doesn't overreact, and she doesn't enforce norms she no longer cares about. Her energy simply becomes self-contained, focused inward, and unconcerned with external validation. What makes this so powerful is that it signals a total emotional and social detachment. She is still present, still observant, but only for herself. The room can shift and sway, but she doesn't move to accommodate it. Her focus, her energy, and her influence belong solely to her. This is one of the clearest signs that she couldn't care less. A Sigma female who stops reading the room isn't ignorant or unaware. She is choosing to disengage completely from the expectations and perceptions of everyone else, reclaiming her autonomy with quiet, undeniable authority. Number 11. She no longer pre-chooses her words to protect your feelings. A Sigma female normally thinks before she speaks, not out of fear or hesitation, but out of strategy and respect. She carefully pre-chooses her words to soften impact, avoid unnecessary conflict, and maintain balance in relationships. Her communication is precise, intentional, and layered with empathy, allowing her to express truth without breaking connection. But when she stops caring, that careful calibration vanishes completely. She no longer tailors her words to cushion your emotions or preserve your ego. What comes out is direct, unfiltered, and brutally honest. This shift is both revealing and disarming. People who have grown used to her tact and diplomacy suddenly find themselves facing the full weight of her perspective, delivered without compromise. She doesn't sugarcoat mistakes, explain away misbehavior, or soften critiques to make them more palatable. Her words cut through pretense not to wound, but simply because she refuses to expend energy protecting someone who no longer matters in the way she once cared. The power of this behavior lies in its quiet clarity. She doesn't need to raise her voice or create drama. The truth in her statements carries its own impact. People start to realize that they can no longer rely on her for emotional cushioning, that the space between her thoughts and her speech is now direct and unmediated. There is no manipulation, no hidden agenda, just honesty unshackled by concern for others' comfort. Her unfiltered communication is a signal of total detachment. It demonstrates that her emotional bandwidth is no longer invested in managing or influencing how others feel. Instead, she prioritizes clarity, efficiency, and her own mental energy. The shift is undeniable and often startling for those accustomed to her softer, calculated approach. Once this change occurs, it's unmistakable. She couldn't care less, and her words are no longer tools of diplomacy. They are a reflection of a mind and spirit that has reclaimed autonomy, speaking only what she deems necessary, no matter how raw or confronting it may seem. Number 12. She starts treating every interaction like a transaction. When a Sigma female stops caring, her approach to interactions changes in a way that is subtle yet unmistakably powerful. She no longer invests emotionally for the sake of connection, approval, or validation. Every conversation, every engagement, every exchange becomes transactional, evaluated strictly on its value, relevance, or necessity. She gives what is required, nothing more. There's no hidden effort to entertain, please, or soften the experience for others. Her presence is precise, measured, and entirely intentional. This transformation is striking because it completely alters the dynamic people are used to. Previously, she might have added layers of thoughtfulness, emotional nuance, or support to maintain a sense of harmony or connection. She might have gone out of her way to make interactions smoother, more pleasant, or more meaningful. But when she doesn't care, all of that disappears. The extra effort she once applied vanishes, leaving only the bare essentials of communication or engagement. She gives information, assistance, or attention if it serves a purpose, but she no longer indulges in the emotional padding that people take for granted. The effect on others is immediate, even if subtle at first. People may feel the shift in energy, notice the lack of emotional cushioning, or realize that attempts to charm or manipulate no longer work. Her interactions feel cleaner, sharper, and almost neutral, because she is no longer motivated by empathy, obligation, or social expectation. She is fully operating from a place of efficiency and self-preservation, reserving her energy for things that truly matter to her. What makes this behavior so powerful is that it signals total detachment without creating conflict. She doesn't need to argue, explain, or withdraw dramatically. The transactional nature of her interactions speaks volumes. It communicates a single undeniable truth. Her investment is now purely deliberate and functional, and nothing more. This is a Sigma female who has drawn the line, reclaimed her energy, and made it unmistakably clear that she no longer participates emotionally in interactions that no longer serve her, leaving everyone else to adjust to her precision and autonomy. When a Sigma female stops caring, the shift is profound, subtle, and unforgettable. Every change, from her silence to her detachment, from her unfiltered honesty to the transactional way she approaches interactions, signals a mind and spirit that has reclaimed control over its own energy. She doesn't make a show of disengaging. She simply moves with precision, decisiveness, and a quiet authority that leaves a lasting impact on anyone who once counted on her attention, approval, or emotional labor. Her detachment isn't about cruelty or vengeance. It's about clarity, self-respect, and the uncompromising choice to protect her mental and emotional bandwidth. What makes a Sigma female so extraordinary is how seamlessly she flips this switch. Relationships, expectations, and social dynamics that once relied on her influence suddenly exist without her intervention. She doesn't chase, she doesn't justify, and she doesn't explain. She simply redirects her energy where it matters most, leaving only the unmistakable trace of her autonomy behind. To witness it is to understand how rare and powerful this form of detachment truly is. It's clean, controlled, and absolute, demonstrating that the care of a Sigma female is a privilege, not a guarantee. Recognizing these signs isn't about fear, it's about awareness. It's about seeing the unmistakable markers of a personality that values itself above all else. A woman who has learned the art of guarding her energy and engaging with the world only on her own terms. These behaviors are extraordinary, brutally honest, and impossible to ignore once understood. They show a level of self-possession and psychological precision few can match, making the Sigma female both mesmerizing and untouchable. If you found this deep dive into the Sigma female mind enlightening, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more eye-opening content. Don't forget to like, comment, and share so others can understand these unique, brutally honest truths as well. Stay tuned, because the deeper you go into the world of Sigma personalities, the more extraordinary and revealing it becomes.